I had just come inside from the back garden, still wearing my muddy gloves, when my phone rang. It was my son-in-law. He never called me directly, not once in 4 years of marriage to my daughter. So when I saw his name on the screen, something cold moved through me before I even answered. Beverley. His voice was strange, tight. You need to come to Foothills Medical. Now, don't tell anyone yet. Just come. I didn't ask questions. I pulled off my gloves, grabbed my keys off the hook by the back door, and drove. Calgary in November feels like the world is holding its breath. The sky that evening was the color of old pewter, and the streets were dusted with the first real snow of the season. I drove through it without seeing any of it. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was already somewhere it didn't want to go. My daughter's name is Nora. She is 31 years old. She is a registered nurse at the same hospital I was driving to, which struck me as unbearable the whole way there, that she was somewhere inside that building and I still didn't know why. My son-in-law, Callum, met me at the emergency entrance. He looked like he hadn't slept. There was something on his face I couldn't read. Guilt, I thought later. At the time, I thought it was just fear. She's stable, he said, before I could open my mouth. What happened to her? He looked away from me, down the hall, at the floor, at nothing. She fell. I am 63 years old. I have been a mother for 31 of those years. I know exactly what a person looks like when they are telling you a word that isn't a lie, but isn't the whole truth either. Take me to her, I said. Nora was in a curtained bay in emergency. She had a split lip, a bruised cheekbone, 2 cracked ribs, and a fracture in her left wrist that the attending physician told me had come from trying to catch herself. She was pale in a way that frightened me. When I came through the curtain, she turned her head and looked at me and then looked away, which frightened me more. I sat beside her and took her good hand in both of mine. "My darling," I said. Just that. I didn't push. I've learned over the years that the fastest way to close a person is to push. She was quiet for a long time. Callum had stayed in the hall. I could see his shadow through the curtain, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Then Nora said, very quietly, his mother was there. I kept my hands still around hers. I kept my face still around hers. I kept my face still. She came to the house this morning, Nora said. Callum was at work. She has a key. A pause. I didn't know she had a key. Callum's mother is a woman named Rosalind. She is 58, recently divorced, lives in Airdrie in a house that Callum helped her buy after the divorce. She had never liked Nora. I had known this from the first Christmas when she talked past my daughter for an entire dinner as though Nora were a piece of furniture that someone had moved into the wrong room. But I had chalked it up to the ordinary difficulty of women and their sons. I had told myself it would smooth out. She said things to me, Nora said. Her voice was very flat, about the baby. Everything in me went still. What baby? Nora looked at me then. Her eyes filled. I'm 10 weeks, she whispered. I was going to tell you on Sunday. I couldn't speak for a moment. I pressed her hand harder. She said it wasn't right, Nora said, that I wasn't right. That what I came from wasn't. She stopped, swallowed. She said some things about you, about our family, about where we're from. She shook her head slightly. Callum's grandfather came from Hong Kong. His grandmother was from Guangdong province. Rosalind. She never forgave that. She married into the family, but she never forgave it. And now her son married. Nora's voice broke. She called my baby a mistake. She said Callum would understand eventually, that he'd see. I've felt anger before in my life. Grief, fear, the ordinary shocks of living. But what I felt sitting in that hospital bay holding my daughter's fractured wrist was something I don't have a clean word for. It was very quiet and very deep, and it had no bottom. Did she touch you? I said. Nora closed her eyes. She grabbed my arm when I tried to walk away. I pulled back and she shoved me and I fell against the kitchen island. A long breath. She left. She just left. Callum came home for lunch and found me on the floor. I sat with her for another hour. I made sure the baby was confirmed healthy. A heartbeat, the doctor said. Strong and steady. I spoke to the attending physician about the documentation of injuries. I used a tone of voice I haven't needed since I was a crown prosecutor in this city 20 years ago, before I retired to take care of my own mother in her last years. The attending looked at me over the top of his clipboard and nodded and wrote things down very carefully. Then I went into the hall. Callum was sitting in one of the plastic chairs against the wall. He looked up at me with the expression of a man who expects to be destroyed and has decided not to try to avoid it. I sat down beside him, not across from him, beside. "How long have you known?" I said. "Since this afternoon." His voice was hollow. "I swear to you, I came home and found her, and I brought her straight here. Did you know your mother had a key?" A pause. She asked for one. "When we moved in case of I didn't think, no," I said. "You didn't." I let that sit. Then I said, "You have a decision to make, Callum. Not tomorrow, tonight. I need to know where you stand because what comes next depends on it." He put his face in his hands. He was quiet for a long time. When he looked up, his eyes were red. "She's my mother," he said. "But she?" He started again. "She hurt my wife. She hurt my—" He couldn't finish. "Yes," I said. "She did." He nodded, slowly at first and then with more certainty, as though something was settling into place inside him. "Tell me what to do," he said. "Please." I drove home through the snow. I changed out of my garden clothes. I made tea I didn't drink. And then I called my brother. My brother's name is Warren. He is 67, retired from the RCMP after 31 years, and he lives 40 minutes south of me in Okotoks with his wife and a vegetable garden that is, frankly, better than mine. He is the steadiest person I have ever known. When our father died, when our mother was sick, when I went through my own divorce 17 years ago, Warren was always just there. Calm, clear. Already thinking 3 steps ahead, he picked up on the second ring. "Bev." That's all he said. He knows the difference between my voices. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is his way. When I finished, there was a short silence. "Okay," he said. "I'm coming over." He arrived in 45 minutes. He sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea he actually drank and a yellow legal pad he'd brought from home, because Warren has never trusted anything important to a screen. We talked for 2 hours. There were things I already knew. That Rosalind could be charged. The assault was documented, the injuries photographed, the hospital records solid. That Nora had the right to pursue it, if she chose. That in Alberta, domestic assault charges could be laid by the Crown even without the victim's participation, though a cooperative complainant made everything cleaner. But there were things Warren knew that I didn't. He had retired as a staff sergeant. He still had connections in the Calgary Police Service. Good connections. People who would make sure a file didn't get lost. He knew exactly how to make sure that Rosalind's key to Nora and Callum's house was legally retrieved, and that she was formally notified of the no-contact condition that would accompany any charges. He also knew something else, which he told me quietly while I sat across from him with my hands around my cold tea. "Rosalind got a line of credit last year," he said. $70,000, secured against her house." He paused. "Callum co-signed it?" I looked at him. "Callum told me," Warren said. "She said it was for the house. Renovations. He was helping her get back on her feet after the divorce." He set down his pen. "The renovations don't exist, Bev. I did a land title search before I drove over. There are no permits, no contractors on record, nothing. The money had been moving somewhere else. Rosalind had a habit that Callum hadn't known about, or hadn't let himself know about. Online gambling. A pattern of transfers to payment platforms that Warren recognized from cases he'd worked. The $70,000 was largely gone, and Callum, as co-signer, was technically exposed. She was going to keep going, I said. Until she couldn't, Warren said, or until something stopped her. We weren't loud about any of it. We sat at my kitchen table in the quiet of a Calgary winter night, and we planned carefully the way our father had taught us. Measure twice, cut once, never act from anger alone. The next morning, Callum met us at a law office on 8th Avenue WW. I had called ahead to a colleague of mine from my Crown days, a woman named, well, it doesn't matter her name. What matters is that she was sharp, and she was thorough, and she had, by the time we sat down, already pulled Callum's credit records and prepared a full picture of his exposure. Callum's face when he saw the numbers was something I won't describe in detail. He had loved his mother. Whatever else is true, that part was true, and watching that love become something that had to be grieved rather than held, that was not a good moment to witness. But he didn't look away from the documents. He sat there and read every page. He signed the authorization for the fraud referral. He called his bank himself from the boardroom and reported the account activity. He followed every instruction he was given with a precision that told me something important about him, that when it finally came to the moment of choosing, he chose without flinching. Rosalind was contacted by Calgary Police Service 3 days later. The assault charges were formally laid. She was also advised, separately, that a financial fraud investigation had been opened. She called Callum 17 times in one afternoon. He did not answer. He showed me the voicemails later. I sat in their living room, the living room where Nora had now been resting for a week, her ribs healing, the baby still strong, and I listened to Rosalind's voice change across those 17 messages, from indignant to explanatory to pleading to something that was almost threatening, though not quite enough to constitute anything actionable. Almost. Nora sat beside me on the couch with a cup of rooibos tea and her feet tucked under her. She had been very quiet since the hospital. Not broken. Nora has never been someone who breaks easily, but careful with herself in a way I understood. She was processing. Did you know? She asked me. About any of it. The money, did you ever see it? No, I said honestly. I saw that she didn't like you. I thought I understood why. I told myself it was ordinary. I looked at my daughter. I should have looked closer. She shook her head. It wasn't yours to see, Mum. You're my daughter. I know. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I know. We sat like that for a while. The snow outside had deepened overnight, and the backyard was white and clean, and the light was the particular flat gray of a Calgary afternoon in late November. I could hear Callum in the kitchen making something that smelled like soup. He had been cooking every day since she came home. It was the only way he seemed to know how to say what he needed to say. She told me the baby would be confused, Nora said quietly. That's what she said. That the baby would grow up confused about who it was. I felt that thing again. That deep, quiet thing without a bottom. Your baby, I said carefully, will grow up knowing exactly who it is. It will know its great-grandmother's roast chicken recipe and its grandfather's Cantonese, and how to change a tire, and how to sit with someone who is hurting. And it will know, without any question at all, that it is loved. Front and back and sideways and through. Nora made a small sound, half laugh, half something else. Confused, she said softly. Imagine. The preliminary court date was set for the following February. Rosalind retained a defense lawyer, which was her right. The fraud investigation moved at its own pace, as these things do. Warren's contact at the CPS kept us informed of the general shape of things without crossing any lines, just so we weren't surprised. What surprised me was Rosalind's sister. Her name was Patrice, and I had met her exactly once, at a backyard barbecue the summer after Nora and Callum's wedding. She had seemed pleasant enough, quieter than Rosalind, with better manners. She called me on a Thursday morning in December through Callum, who passed me her number with an expression I couldn't interpret. She said she was sorry. She said it a number of times in a number of different ways, and I let her say it. She said she had known about the gambling for 2 years and had tried to intervene and hadn't known what to do when Rosalind refused help. She said she hadn't known about the money from Callum. She said, and this was the part I believed most, that she was afraid of her own sister. I told her that if she had relevant information, she should speak with the investigators, not with me. She said she understood. There was a pause, and then she said, "Your daughter, is she all right?" "She will be," I said. Another pause. "The baby too." "Yes," I said. "The baby too." I heard something in Patrice's exhale. Relief, I thought. Or something close to it. My granddaughter was born in June, on a Tuesday, in the same hospital where her mother had been treated in November. She weighed 7 pounds, 4 ounces. She had Callum's dark eyes and Nora's mouth and absolutely nobody's idea of what she was supposed to be, which is exactly as it should be. Callum called me from the delivery room while they were still doing the measurements. He was crying. Not the quiet kind, the full kind, without any embarrassment about it. "She's here," he said. "She's perfect. Bev, she's absolutely perfect." I was already in the car. I had been ready for 3 days. Warren came with his wife, and they brought food, which is what our family does with every significant event. We arrive with food, and we stay for as long as we are needed. We sat in the postpartum room that evening, all of us crowded around Nora and this new small person who had no idea yet what she'd arrived into, and I looked around at my brother and his wife, and my daughter and her husband, and I thought about what Rosalind had predicted. Confusion. Wrongness. Something that shouldn't exist. My granddaughter yawned. It was the most complete refutation I have ever seen. Rosalind's case was still moving through the system. These things take time, and I had stopped measuring the days. The fraud charges were more serious than the assault charges in terms of potential consequences, and her defense lawyer was doing what defense lawyers do. I had accepted that justice in a courtroom moves at its own pace, and is not always the same as the justice you feel in your chest. But there were other kinds of justice, smaller ones, that had already arrived. Callum had the line of credit restructured. The bank, given the fraud investigation, had agreed to remove him from the instrument, and the debt was now solely Rosalind's responsibility. His credit record was in the process of being formally corrected. The financial exposure that could have followed him for years was, piece by piece, being lifted. He had changed the locks on the first day Nora came home from the hospital. He had also, quietly, removed his mother from his emergency contact information at work and updated his benefits to reflect Nora as sole beneficiary. These were not gestures. They were decisions. There is a difference. Nora went back to work 4 months after the baby on a part-time schedule. She came home the first day with color in her cheeks, and that particular light she gets when she has done something that matters. Which, I will tell you, she has always had, even as a child. She used to come home from school with that same look when she'd helped a friend through something or understood a concept that had been difficult. She has always been built for the work of caring for people. I don't know where she got it. I suppose it doesn't matter. What matters is that she sat at my kitchen table that evening with the baby in the bouncy chair between us and ate the soup I'd made and talked to me about her patience and the particular satisfaction of doing something useful. And I watched her and thought, she is still here. All of her. Whatever Rosalind had tried to diminish, it was still here. Intact, growing actually, the way things sometimes do after they've been through something hard. That's the thing no one tells you about cruelty. It rarely finishes what it starts. Most of the time, it just proves very clearly what it was trying to deny. My granddaughter's name is June, for the month she arrived. Her middle name is a Cantonese name that Callum's grandmother chose before she passed, a name that had been waiting in the family for a girl who was slow to come. When I say it out loud, it feels like holding something very old and very alive at the same time. Confused, Rosalind had said. June looks at the world with a steadiness that I recognize. She looks at things the way Warren does, the way my mother did. Like she already knows what she's doing here and she's just waiting for the rest of us to catch up. I am 63 years old. I have outlasted a marriage and a career and a diagnosis that frightened me 6 years ago and turned out to be manageable. I have learned that the bravest thing is usually not the loudest thing. That the people who try to tell you what blood is worth almost never know what they're talking about. That the family you build with your hands and your presence and your showing up is real in every way that counts. I keep my muddy gloves by the back door. I still grow too many tomatoes every August. Warren still beats me at cribbage every time we play, which is something I have never admitted to him and have no intention of starting. And on Tuesday evenings when Nora and Callum bring June over for dinner, I watch my granddaughter learn the names of things: the window, the dog, the wooden spoon, me, and I think, there it is. There is the answer to everything Rosalind feared. Not confusion, not wrongness. Just a child, wide-eyed, already at home in the world she was born into. I've been thinking about the morning Callum called me, how I was still wearing my muddy gloves, how ordinary that moment was before it wasn't. There's something I've come to understand, not all at once but slowly, the way most true things arrive. What Rosalind set in motion came back to her in full, not because the universe was keeping score in any mystical sense, but because the choices we make leave marks. Hers left a paper trail, a police file, and a daughter-in-law who documented every injury before she even left the hospital. Actions have weight. They go somewhere. What I'm most proud of, and I don't say this lightly, is that Nora never stopped doing the right thing even when the right thing was painful. She didn't hide what had happened. She didn't minimize it to protect anyone's comfort. She sat in that hospital bay and told the truth clearly and completely, and that honesty was what made everything else possible. That's what I call integrity, though the word sounds formal for something that was really just my daughter refusing to pretend. She had it in her from the beginning. I don't know entirely where it comes from, but I watched it hold her upright when other things were failing. Warren's contribution was different. His was the kind of clear-headed thinking that doesn't get rattled by emotion. And not because he didn't feel anything, but because he'd spent 30 years learning to set feeling aside long enough to see clearly. He looked at the situation, pulled the land title records, did the math, and came to my kitchen table with a legal pad. That's intelligence used in service of people you love. It's the difference between being upset and being effective. I've tried to have more of that in my own life. I'm still working on it. And Callum. I think about Callum often. He could have chosen differently at every single junction. He could have minimized, deflected, stayed loyal to the version of his mother he needed to believe in. Instead, he sat in that boardroom and read every page and signed what needed signing and made phone calls that cost him something real. That took a particular kind of strength. Not the loud kind, the kind that doesn't announce itself. He showed up for Nora when showing up meant losing something else, and I think that will be the foundation of everything good that comes for their family. June is 7 months old now. She has no idea about any of it. She doesn't know about the documents or the court dates or the November night her grandmother and her great-uncle sat at a kitchen table and planned carefully while the snow came down outside. She just knows the faces that show up for her, consistently, without condition. That's the whole of it, really, not the legal outcome, though that mattered, not the money recovered, though that mattered too. What matters most is the shape of the family she's growing up inside. And that shape was built, deliberately and with great care, by people who chose to do the hard thing instead of the easy one. I keep my muddy gloves by the back door. I come inside when it matters. That's the only thing I know how to teach.